Okay, so this week's chapter actually starts off where the last one left off, with Noelle powering up into her saint mode and Vonica being very excited to fight Noelle in this brand new transformation form because she can tell instantly that Noelle is vastly more powerful than she was the last time they fought. And to test her out, she actually sends some blood clones or some blood minions out to attack Noelle, which obviously Noelle easily dances right through, which is actually very well drawn by the way that Tabata has her literally dancing through it, kind of like the way she, if you remember the intro for, I want to say, during the parts of the story where she was fighting off against the elf version of Hana in the Dark Tower or in the Dark Castle, that actually kind of seems very similar to the way Tabata drew her basically dancing through, like I said, these blood clones that Vonica sends after her. And obviously, the more that Noelle shows off this brand new power that she has, the more excited Vonica gets throughout the entire chapter. Now, what's kind of interesting is the fact that, and I want to point this out because it's actually brought up in, I want to say, the second or third page of the chapter, that is that Real mentions that Charlotte, and I believe Charlotte actually mentioned this in the last chapter as well, that Charlotte actually had used her brand new power to basically weaken the curse magic on Vonica. So Vonica is technically a little bit weaker than she would be at 100%. But even though she is a little bit weaker than she should be at 100%, we do know from her fight that we saw her having against Charlotte and Real a few chapters ago that she was easily overpowering the two of them. So we do have a good estimate of exactly how strong Monica is right now. And despite that, throughout the entirety of her fight against Noelle in this chapter, I don't think we see her land a single hit on Noelle. And the fact that Noelle was so easily able to dominate against Vonica in this chapter actually makes sense when you think about two things. For one, the Dark Tribe members, when they activate these 100% transformations, are said to be around the same power level as Lilith and Nama. I would most likely say actually a little bit weaker than Lilith and Nama were, because the two of them talked about Dante like they could easily kill him off. So I would put them actually just below Lilith and Nama. So those are very powerful stats right there for them. But when you think back to the fight that Lilith and Nama had against Asta once he showed up in his Devil Union form, they were not able to land a single hit on him. He was easily able to kill off Nama, and then when the two of them fused, they still couldn't land a hit on them because Asta was just overwhelmingly powerful compared to them. Now, think back to a few chapters ago when I talked about the rule of three, or actually, I think it actually might have been the previous chapter. And the rule of three when it comes to Shonen Jump is that the three main focus characters are usually around the same power level, and whenever one gets a power up, the other two gets one as well. And like I already mentioned, Asta was able to beat Lilith and Nama prior to them fusing, and even after they fused, without taking any damage. So when it comes to Vonica, someone who is weaker than the unfused Lilith and Nama, and then on top of that, weakened even more by Charlotte's ability to absorb curses, fighting off against Noelle, who has a major power up that puts her on a level probably just below Asta in his Devil Unit form, that shows that Noelle should easily be able to defeat Vonica without taking any damage. This also means that once we cut back over to Yuno's fight, once he activates the power of Saint, he should be able to easily defeat Xenon in the exact same way. Unless we end up finding out that Xenon's Devil actually has some kind of special property to it that surpasses that ability, because we still have yet to be revealed exactly what Xenon's Devil's name is. So there could be something special about that character that we haven't been revealed to just yet. Now, Undine actually mentions that they only have 1 minute to defeat Vonica, which seems to mean that there's actually some kind of time limit put on their transformation. It only lasts for about a minute, which does make sense when you consider the fact that they only had 3 days to train up on the transformation. So they probably haven't perfected it just yet, and considering the fact that Undine's actually going to be going back to Lower Pratica most likely after this fight, or after this arc, they probably won't have the ability to train up on it anymore. So this is going to be probably the one and only time that we actually get to see Noelle fight in this arc with this transformation. Although we could potentially end up seeing her later on fight off against another opponent, it depends if she actually has the ability like Asta to go back into this form multiple times, but it can only do it in 1 minute intervals and then have to take a few minutes to rest. And then after Undine gives Noelle the 1 minute warning, Noelle actually very confidently says that she could defeat Vonica within 30 seconds. And the next few pages kind of does prove that, because we proceed to see her just again one-sidedly defeating Vonica, landing blow after blow. And I really love the way that Tabata drew her fight against Vonica, because like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, each step, each movement that she makes very much seems like she's dancing around while fighting Vonica. It's very much reminiscent to, like I said, the opening where we see her dancing or kind of like skating on water, fighting off against Fauna. That is very much Noelle's fight style in this chapter, and I actually really dig it. And then, of course, throughout the entire fight, even though Vonica is very easily being defeated by Noelle, she's getting more and more excited about the fight. And then we actually get a cutback or a flashback to when Vonica actually first gained her powers of Megakula, which was a few years ago. Actually, at this point was 17 years ago. right after Noelle was born, because we end up finding out that she had heard about Aesir and that she was resting in her home. So once she gained the powers of Megakula, she actually rushed over to the Clover Kingdom to fight against Aesir. And this is when we end up finding out that the child that Aesir was trying to protect, back when the two of them fought all those years ago, was actually Noelle and Noelle. Because apparently during their fight, even though Aesir was being easily defeated, and actually I don't want to say easily defeated, because when we cut over to the two of them in the flashback, they're both very heavily damaged, but I would say that Aesir most likely is a little bit more damaged than Vonica was. Now, during this flashback, we see that Noelle and Noelle were hiding out in the bushes nearby watching the fight. And I would assume that the reason why they were hiding out there was because they were probably outside already with Aesir, and then once she sensed Vonica coming, she probably sent them into the bushes to hide. But during the fight, Noelle, being obviously a very newborn baby, starts crying out because of all the loud noises and all the stuff that she's actually sensing from her mother being in danger. And Vonica, picking up on the cry, actually heads over to Noelle and Noelle and tries to kill them. And then this is when Aesir activates a brand new power-up that looks very similar to Noelle's Saint Valkyrie dress and rushes in at Vonica, landing a very critical blow, a very fatal blow against her, to the point where Megakula actually had to step in, use his curse magic to get them away from her, and then she tells Vonica later on that if she had not stepped in, Vonica most likely would have died in that fight. And this flashback was actually very exciting for two reasons. One, it adds brand new context to Noelle's backstory, because I had always assumed that Vonica and Aesir's fight happened prior to Noelle being born, and then through being weakened by Megakula's curse at the result of the fight, and in the process of giving birth to Noelle, that is what killed off Aesir. But we can see that Noelle was very obviously already born prior to the meeting, and then during the fight, Noelle didn't really have any part to play in it, besides the fact that when she was a baby she cried out and Vonica heard that cry and threatened to kill her. But regardless of if Noelle had cried in that moment or not, Aesir still would have died by either Vonica just being stronger than her, or once she achieved her power up and landed that fatal blow on Vonica, Megakula using the curse magic to get away and then placing the curse on Aesir. So regardless of what Noelle did, Aesir still would have died. So it really makes me wonder, especially since Noelle very obviously had no part to play in Aesir's death, why her family puts so much blame on her for it. Especially since Noelle was there and witnessed the entirety of the events. And honestly, the only thing I can think of is that, well, everyone in her family besides Noelle is kind of a dick. And then the other reason why I'm excited about this flashback is that by seeing that Aesir achieves a very similar power-up to Noelle's Saint Valkyrie dress, this shows that once Udine actually goes back to Lord Pachika, Noelle has the potential to still achieve this level of power. She just has to put in the effort and hard work, which we've seen Noelle do throughout the entirety of the series. And then once the flashback ends, we cut back to the fight between Vonica and Noelle, and we see them both readying up giant attacks. Vonica gets ready a giant red beast, and Noelle actually uses Sea Dragon's Roar, and the two of them actually do clash and cancel each other out, but we see that Noelle was actually just using the Sea Dragon's Roar as a feint, because she was actually hiding inside of it, and once the two attacks clashed with each other, she came flying out of it and landed the attack that she almost landed on Vonica back in their first fight, and then we actually see Aesir land on Vonica in the flashback, stabbing her right through the stomach, which, by the way, I forgot to mention that Noelle has actually been using a sword instead of her usual spear once she activated her saint form. But that's pretty much where the chapter ends, with Vonica being stabbed through the stomach in a very fatal blow by Noelle. And yeah, that's where the chapter ends. Now, I'm assuming in the next chapter, we're going to see Megakula do the same thing that she did against Aesir, basically using her curse magic to try to place a curse on Noelle and give Vonica the chance to escape so that she can heal up because she suffered a very fatal wound. But I'm assuming that Noelle's either saint powers or Charlotte's powers are actually going to cancel out the curse magic, and basically Vonica is just going to be officially defeated in the beginning of the chapter, which will then lead us on to basically seeing Lord Pachika being freed from her cursed manipulation. And then possibly after the reunion between her, Gaja, and Noelle, we're going to cut over to the fight between Yuno versus Xenon, which I'm very interested in seeing how that fight's going, assuming that they haven't been frozen in time basically this entire time since the last time we saw them. And that most likely Yuno is probably losing that fight because he's probably not aware of Saint just yet. And I'm also hoping in the next chapter we get a proper explanation from Udine about the 1 minute time limit, because I'm assuming that's how many times or how long that Noelle can actually use her transformation at a time, but we don't know if that's per day or if she just has to wait a few minutes before she can use it again. And I'm hoping that she only has to wait a few minutes before she can use it again, because I pretty much assume that by the end of the arc, we're going to have, just like we had Yuno, Asta, and Yami fighting off against Zagred in the previous big arc, that we're going to have Yuno, Asta, and Noelle fighting off against the big bad of this arc. So I'm looking forward to that, and if she doesn't actually have access to her Saint dress anymore once the big bad comes out, then she can't participate in that fight. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for the chapter. I really enjoyed this one. Really love to see the way the body through Noelle fighting. Like I said, the dancing that he did for her, which is amazing, top tier art. Can't wait to see more next week. I give this chapter a 10 out of 10. Can't wait to see you guys next time. Peace out.